I very much liked what I heard from him. I didn't like the Chelsea performance. I thought it was very pedestrian, pass, with no urgency in the last third. 466 passes in the first half, which I think was almost a Premier League record. Wonderful, but we're not here to see passes. We're here to see goals and attacking, urgent football. And I did make an observation at the beginning of the week that I felt that his default setting would be go to more experienced players. I got piled on by Chelsea players saying that's rubbish. Look at what he does at PSG. Well, he dropped a lot of the younger players and saw what he saw from the certain players. I thought he spoke in such a way, you can see why Chelsea went for this manager, because his language. Yeah, I can see the dynamic of what there's no hiding from the expectations. He turns around and says straight out of the gate, you come to Chelsea as a manager and a player, you're expected to win the league. And that leaves you no wiggle room, no margins. Managers like to leave a little layer of exit strategy about the obligations upon someone else and the idea that they've got a fallback position. He's straight out of the gate. I clearly understand the dynamics of what I've come into. I've come in to win the Premier League, to win the Champions League. So you set your stall out and you judge yourself by the standards. I also thought his attention to detail, the manner in which his delivery was imparted, the talk about, in the second half, the amount of recovery runs that they made. This is the detail that this man will. These Chelsea players have got their work cut out, because this guy will be like Mourinho was in 2004. He believes in himself. He's absolutely unequivocal in his thinking, and he will, in the initial interview, and people can of course change because of the initial perception of Sarri when he came in was Sarri ball was something that everyone aspired to, and then it got something that was ridiculed. But the cut of this man's jib in the first press interview, A, his enthusiasm to be there, B, his understanding of the football business, and C, his own definite thinking came across in such a way that I thought, you're going to be interesting. Yeah, you're going to be interesting for the other managers.
I looked on social media last night. No Billy Gilmour, not even on the bench. Mason Mount on the bench didn't start. Yeah. Now, to be fair to Tuchel, he's saying it's my first game.
Sure,
I don't know these guys.
Sure, but then the default setting shouldn't necessarily be. Well, he will know these guys. Mason Mount's made enough appearances for him to be on his radar. He will have done his assessment. He will know about who, what, when, and why, because he hasn't just been picked up by Chelsea 3 or 4 days ago. He's been tapped up by Chelsea or spoken to Chelsea, because he's not a manager anymore at PSG. The tapping up doesn't apply. For weeks, he'll have looked at the Chelsea players. He'll understand the dynamics of what he's got. What I don't agree with is the notion that in somehow, shape or form, he will be dismantling Frank Lampard's legacy. With due respect to Frank, and I'm in the camp of thinking that it was a bit previous to have gotten rid of him, he ain't got a legacy. He took young players into that team because it's the only option he had. He had young players available to him because the only option he had with the group of players he had was to patronise young players. That's not a legacy.
But to be fair to Frank, in his time there, he said youth is the future at this football club, and I'll make sure of it.
Well, yes, sure. And ultimately, if they're good enough, they're old enough, sort of mentality.
Yeah, he was proud of that.
By the same token, the young players that he played were in some part enforced upon him because of the options that were available to him. He then went and spent £250 million on senior players in the summer, or had £250 million worth of players bought for him, if you want to go down the Harry Redknapp adage.
But he carried on with the same youth players that he's blooded previous.
Because they were, in his mindsets, players he'd grown to have a relationship with over 18 months, and he saw that he could trust those sort of players, and saw that certain players were performing at a level, and ultimately he developed that relationship with them over a period of time. And he rotated those players. There's a lot of arguments about how much Tammy Abraham has actually played. If you listen to his agent, he thinks he should be playing all the time. And if you look at his stats, there's possibly an argument that he could and should be. But I don't think there's a legacy, with due respect to Frank, and I'm a major advocate of Frank Lampard and spoken very defensively of the situation with him, and think he could do a wonderful job at other Premier League clubs, because I think the metamorphosis from Frank Lampard as player to manager will now be completed by this sacking, and the experience he'll have got will be immeasurable in the opportunity for Frank Lampard to become an elite manager.